If I had to describe my childhood with two things, it would probably be playing video games and of course, watching cartoons. The 2000s really felt like a goldmine for cartoons for me, and honestly, nowadays, I feel like it's pretty hard for me to find a cartoon that really captures me in the way these old shows used to do. I'm not trying to say that cartoons now are bad. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. I think a lot of shows nowadays are pretty amazing, but to me, some of these shows just can't be beat. I think I might be clouded by nostalgia, but I think they're undeniably quality entertainment. Looking back, I usually remember shows like Courage the Cowardly Dog, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, Ed and Eddie, and, of course, Totally Spies, because I have a need to mention it every time I make a video at this point. But what about those less memorable shows? What about those shows that make you question if they even ever existed? That is what I'm going to delve into today, the shows I experienced as a child, but they are just sort of a distant memory nowadays, at least until I made this video. Now I wake up and it's cartoons on my mind. I go to bed and I'm just thinking about these cartoons. I try to ignore anything, I'm thinking about these cartoons. What I'm trying to say is, I might be going insane. But insanity aside, I'm still going to talk about them one more time, even though I've been annoying my friends with these this entire week. So, icebergs are still popular, right? I think. I might be late to the trend, but hey, let's make this sort of like an iceberg. That'll be fun. It'll be like a one entry per tier iceberg. We'll start with the least obscure show, and then we'll go down to something I can barely remember. So much so that I legit thought I dreamt it up for like the longest time. Alright, that being said, let's get this journey started. When I start thinking about shows from the early to mid 2000s, this is probably one of the last I would ever mention. Now, you might be thinking, if you barely remember this show, then why put it all the way at the top? Well, let me explain my reasoning. None of the other shows that I listed down here show up in the game Fusion Fall. And yes, that is my reasoning as to why I made this choice, and you cannot stop me. She was one of those little creatures you could have in the game with you that were like mini-me versions of the Cartoon Network characters, and I really shouldn't get sidetracked, but maybe I'll make a video on Fusion Fall some other day. So what was Juniper Lee about? Well, basically Juniper Lee is one of the only humans capable of seeing monsters which are typically invisible to normal humans, and with this ability, she goes and beats the shit out of them. Aided by her little annoying brother that looks like a gremlin, and a talking pug with a Scottish accent, because why not? It's a pretty straightforward Monster of the Week premise, and honestly, it was okay. I feel like I should try to rate these based on how I liked them as a kid and how I like them now. And if memory serves me right, I really did not care much about this show when I was a kid, but I don't think that's about to change. I mean, I'll probably forget about it in a week or so, but I did feel like I enjoyed it more when I was watching it now than when I watched it as a child. And my apologies to the Juniper Lee fanbase, if that's somehow a thing, but I just feel like shows with similar ideas are just better from back then. That being said, just because it's not for me, it doesn't mean it's not good. There were quite a few jokes that got a laugh out of me in this episode I watched, and I like how the dog looks in this shot. It's kind of funny.
Oh, and you didn't get her one of those candles in the shape of a skull again, did you? No. Oh, hey, I made her a mess. See you there. Bye. See ya.
All I can say in the end, I think it was a pretty fun show. I had a decent time, but I can see why I didn't remember it so vividly in comparison to other shows from back then. I was debating if I should put this show all the way at the top just because of how much I remember this cartoon. I mean, I still reference this show to this day around my friends, but the thing is, I don't really feel like I know many other people that have watched this show. Did Mexico Cartoon Network just spam this show all the time and that's why I got to see it compared to others? Regardless, I mostly watched this show in Spanish, just like pretty much every other cartoon on this list, but somehow hearing this one in English when rewatching it just made it feel more stereotypical, and you know what? It still went kind of hard, I won't lie. But I switched back to the Spanish version because I'm not going to be listening to them calling this character Buena Girl. The story centers around a school for luchadors, and that is pretty much it. Every episode is just some conflict that gets resolved with them duking out in the ring. Not to sell the cartoon short, of course. Obviously, there's quite a bit of humor in it, tiny little stories throughout the episode, and some of it can be pretty funny, some of it falls flat. But the cartoon is obviously meant to be very fast-paced with how short the episodes are, with just like around 11 minutes, I believe. What I do really like about this show is some of the creativity with it. The character designs are colorful, and the fact that everyone has their own luchador mask gives the creators a chance to make some pretty neat looking characters. Even if some of them look a little, well, they don't look great, is all I'll say. I also like how instead of just regular lucha libre, the characters transform into various objects when performing their signature moves. Like for example, the main character's name is Ricochet, so he turns himself into a ball and he ricochets around the arena. Buena Girl transforms into a bulldozer because if you don't follow the rules, she'll just demolish your house. And the Flea, well, the Flea is the Flea. Since this video is sort of all about nostalgia, let me talk about how much bigger this show was in Mexico, I think. I don't know, this is all just personal experience. So, you see, down in Mexico, we had these things that came in little bags of chips, and they were called tazos. They were like these little collectible pieces of plastic and metal, and they had pictures of the characters on them. And of course, Mucha Lucha had a partnership with them.
Número 64. La Pulga.
These things were everywhere. I swear, kids would just bring these to school in little boxes just to show them off and trade them around. One thing is for sure about these, no one actually knew how to play the game that you're supposed to play with them. It's kind of like Pokemon cards in the sense that many people don't actually play the card game or even know how to, except instead of really high quality artworks of Pokemon, it's just a PNG of the Flea on a piece of plastic. What were we actually talking about again? Oh yeah, the cartoon. Enjoyment as a kid, super enjoyable, couldn't get enough of it. Enjoyment now, fun to watch, but there are better things out there.
Vamos a luchar! ¡Mucha lucha! ¡Mucho saco!
This show is, interesting. I feel like maybe not many people remember watching it, but have probably at least heard of it or even just seen the designs of the two main characters. What makes this show interesting is that it's based on two actual real-life people, Ami and Yumi, who are actual musicians. You're probably familiar with their work on Teen Titans. They made the intro song and the song K2G, which plays during the Mad Mod chase scene, which is probably one of the most memorable scenes in Teen Titans. I absolutely love that episode. The show itself, well, I actually liked it quite a lot. I think it's very cutesy and wholesome. I really like how at the beginning of every episode, the real Ami and Yumi do a quick little intro, and also an outro, and I think it just added to the charm of the show. While it probably didn't bring much in terms of writing to Cartoon Network back in the day, I feel like this show really had style, like a very just unique presentation, and it was pretty fitting for the network, actually. Anyways, the cartoon mainly focuses on Ami and Yumi, and of course their manager Cass, as they deal with being rock stars and whatever the random situation the writers wanted to put them into. One thing I really noticed during this show is just how the backgrounds are pretty simple. Most of the time they're just solid colors, but they can get quite creative with these. Some of these are very stylized, and I kind of like it a lot. I think the main characters in this show look really solid, and I think the facial expressions that they make just really captures how this show is trying to blend Western and Japanese animation together. I will say this though, while I did enjoy the episodes I decided to watch, the first episode I watched had a certified weird feet moment, so that was pretty weird. Oh, I also think the cats are cute.
But I'm your #1 fan. Be our #1 fan somewhere else.
Anyways, I know for a fact that when I was a kid, I loved this show. I would never change the channel when this was on TV. But nowadays, well, I definitely would not complain if it was on TV, but yeah, who the heck watches TV anyways? Finally, a show that I just don't have much to say about. This is probably the most forgettable show in this entire list for me, but I just had to include it because when I was doing research for this video, my friend just randomly brought it up and it was like I got mentally flashbanged. maybe I'm underrating the popularity of this show since it's apparently based on a series of books, something that I had no idea about, but never in my life have I heard someone even mention these books, and the cartoon is pretty much the same. Feels like only my friend and I knew about this show when I was talking to anyone else about it. So, what is this show about? Well, as you can probably guess, it's about Edgar and Ellen, twins that live in a creepy house, mansion thing. I don't know, but these kids are literally rolling in money just from how big this place is. Basically, it's just like Zack and Cody, except instead of torturing Mr. Mosby, they commit war crimes, which is clearly reflected by the prison uniforms they wear. And they're not identical twins, they're fraternal twins. And they have a completely different dynamic, and yeah, it's nothing like Zack and Cody. So the basic gist of this show is that these twins just really love pranks.
So, without much ado, I give thee Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet.
1738.
Mostly on this annoying girl that looks like a Google Maps location pin. In fact, why do these three characters all look like Ouija board planchettes? Anyways, the twins cause mayhem, and most of the time it backfires, but in the end they figure it all out, and that's pretty much it. Not much else to this show, some moments in it that were interesting, but overall I don't think it's for me, or even was for me. I don't think I was a huge fan of this back then. I do like the tentacle with an eye on it. I think this is peak character design if you ask me. Overall, a harmless show, a little bit boring to me. It had some decent moments scattered around, but I wouldn't watch it again, and honestly, my childhood self would probably just flip the channel to Disney or Nickelodeon or whatever instead. Also, this is the most ominous looking coming up banner I've seen in any show. Why is he staring at me like that?
The freaks are at your door tonight. Tomorrow and our team will take up the fight.
Alright, this is the big one. And by big one, I mean smallest one because who actually remembers this or has even watched this? It genuinely does not look or feel real to me. So, fun story. I mentioned this earlier, but a few years ago I was talking to a friend about old cartoons and I kept telling them about this show I had vague memories of. It was like some weird horror-themed kids show with pretty interesting visuals. I only had really foggy memories of it, and well, I ended up convincing myself that I had just dreamt it up. Then, I discovered the subreddit r/tip of my tongue, and lo and behold, someone actually knew what the hell I was talking about. Sure, it took a few wrong replies for someone to find it, but someone actually knew what it was. The show was real. It was real. And here it is. So, why was this show so elusive? Why did it feel like no one else I talked to had even ever heard of it? Well, it only lasted 13 episodes. And only 6 of those ever aired in the US. Lucky for me, I didn't live in the US, so guess what? I got the pleasure of experiencing more of the Phantom Investigators. And I'm going to be completely honest here, I came into this with 0 expectations, or at least not any good ones. The only screenshot I had really seen of this show before watching it was the IMDb page poster, and off of that I was just preparing myself for the worst. Couple that with how the show only lasted a couple of episodes, and I could barely remember it, I'm pretty sure you can understand why I wasn't so excited about it. But wow, was I wrong. I'm not going to say this is the best show ever made, or that it even rivals some of my favorites, but I think there is actually a lot to appreciate here, and I truly mean that. So like I said, this is a horror-themed show for children in which a group of middle school children, known as the Phantom Investigators, work together to solve various paranormal cases. A big part of this show also seems to be how the kids have superpowers of their own which aided them in their ghostly, spooky adventures, such as Jericho being a telekinetic and Kira being a telepath, except for Daimona. She gets nothing. She gets to wear a mask. I think it's a pretty simple premise with a lot of potential. It does have the good foundation for a great episodic show, with a new type of ghost being introduced every episode. Now, real quick, I'm going to just start us off with the negatives because I want to end this on a positive note. First off, the dialogue isn't amazing. It's serviceable, I guess, but some lines just feel a little meh. The acting isn't the greatest, and in my opinion, the script writing can be a little lackluster. Second, I can see how the animation would be off-putting for some people, and even a bit messy at times, but honestly, I'm done nitpicking. I'm going to use that to segue into what I actually liked about this show. And that is that there is so much creativity in this show, and I absolutely love it. There's puppets, stop motion, live action animation. They're all combined to make this show feel really distinct. The way I see it, the animators were able to make some of the monsters look like super scary and disgusting just by using stop motion animation, or even live action at times, while in comparison, the main characters look pretty approachable in the way they're animated, and it's just so creative. Like, the heads of these characters are cardboard, while the bodies appear to be puppets, and it all looks stop motion quality, and sometimes when they grab items, they would use like a live action hand. I just think it's super entertaining to watch how the animators would just get creative with the way they were presenting their show. I'm not saying it looks perfect, I think it's a little rough around the edges in some parts, but honestly I just think it's so visually captivating to see what they were doing with what they had available. Not to mention, I'm a big fan of the whole paranormal aspect of the show. I think it's a great way to introduce kids to the world of horror without it being too over the top. Though I will admit, I probably got a few nightmares when I watched this as a child. Just seeing it now, I can already tell this was nightmare fuel. All in all, I actually think this was a pretty underrated show, and it had a ton of potential. I'm not trying to say this is the best thing ever, but honestly, I think it should have lasted at least more than 13 episodes. Speaking of that, I'm not sure if this TV tropes page is right about the reason why this show got cancelled, but if it's right, then this is the most unbelievably dumb and unfair reason for a show to get cancelled. Alright, basically W Kids got upset that the viewership from male viewers began to decline after an extremely successful first showing, and they were just completely ignoring the fact that female viewership was rising. And you know what the worst part about this is? According to this, the network literally picked this show up so they can garner more attention from female viewers. I wish I could make this shit up. Rest in peace, Phantom Investigators. Gone too soon, and I am now the #1 Phantom Investigators fan. I guess you could call me a fanatic. And with that, I'll just see myself out. Anyways, I know I didn't go super in-depth into these, but I hope you guys enjoyed my little trip down memory lane. I just sort of wanted to talk briefly about them and also have an excuse to rewatch these shows because they've been on my head for a while now. That being said, if you enjoyed this video, if you want, you can go ahead and give it a like, leave a little comment. It does help me a lot, especially with how new I am to all of this. Oh, and the subscribe button is pretty cool. Yeah? Okay, yeah. And have a wonderful day, month, year. Peace.